Again, as I said, we're going to be in back in Matthew chapter 25, where we were last week, and I won't go back and reteach. Uh, let's see. I won't go back and reteach last week's lesson from Matthew 25, but I am going to just quickly draw our attention back to the three main points from Matthew 25 last week. These are the two scriptures that we read, uh, beginning with verse 13. We read, "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man comes. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods." So we took on those two scriptures last week, and there were three things that I drew attention to. The first was that word "watch," therefore, is not a casual statement, but rather a serious warning with some very specific results, some very specific outcomes. The second point that I made was that we do not understand the kingdom of heaven. Just as we don't understand the heart of the king, we don't understand many aspects of the kingdom. And you can go back to last week's lesson and listen to that again if you'd like. Um, we don't understand it in the terms of what it is, and we don't understand it in terms of what it isn't. And primarily, last week we talked about the fact that we misunderstand that the kingdom is not synonymous with the church. And it's such a necessary understanding, because the outcome is, if we think those are synonymous terms, we will correlate our Christian life only and calibrate it only against what the church expects. To be good at this and to be good at this and to be involved in these things, that becomes the calibration for the Christian life. We just do what we're supposed to do in church, because the church equals the kingdom. Well, we talked about it last week quite a bit, that that's not true, that the call on your life is much bigger than what just happens at church. Not showing any disregard for church, but to just recognize that your call, that which you have an opportunity to be, all that needs to be put on display is not directly connected to the church. The third thing that we looked at last week was that we do not have a good or a comprehensive understanding of what is included when Jesus said, "And he delivered unto them his goods." We don't know in an easy way, in a practical way, functional way, what those goods are. And because we don't understand those goods that were delivered, then we don't know how to use them either. So last week we addressed those two scriptures, Matthew 25, 13 and 14, covered those three things. And those were really profound things to me. Things I think I knew, but things that really just, like, I don't know if I'd ever sit down and understood what it was exactly that he had given them. What was in these goods that had been delivered to them with the instruction of what to do with them. So last week, those two verses. This week, we're going to move on into verse 15. So I'm going to begin reading there. Matthew 25, 15. "And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. And he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants comes and reckons with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought another 5 talents, and says, Lord, thou delivered unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. And his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and says, Lord, thou delivered unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents besides them. His Lord said unto them, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. So I'm going to stop right there. We're going to talk about these two briefly before we get into talking about this guy number 3. This interaction of how Jesus is telling this is a parable that he's telling. And again, we remember that a parable is not a children's story. It's like he had the deepest, hardest things that he needed to teach us in these parables. So he's using illustrations so that we could get it, so that we would be able to comprehend what he was talking about. These aren't simple things. They are deeply profound things that he's teaching. But this interaction of words and this truth gives us a profound look into the heart of God. If you slow down in the reading of this, you can really, really tell the heart of God described in this passage. Not all, we get the parable and the essence of all the actions going on, but it tells us a great deal about the heart of the Father behind it. On the simplest level, we see that which was given was according to his several ability. Now, that's not a phrase that we use easily. That's not a phrase that we use in our conversation. So I went and looked and tried to understand what it meant, and I was a little bit surprised by the words that make up that phrase, especially several ability. The word several just means personal or individual, that which you have of yourself. And the word ability is the word dynamos or power. And so it was kind of strange, because what Jesus was saying is it's going to be given according to that personal power that you and I have been given. And we recognize that it's going to be given according what the assignment is going to be given to us is according to us. And again, I think that says such a great deal about who the Father is, because it would be so unfortunate for me to have a high school student in a home and an elementary student in my home and expect them to be able to do exactly the same things. That the heart of a father would say, I have to recognize the individual in this and assign them according to a capability. Yep, I could say, yeah, they're both boys. Yes, they're both this. They're both sons. Then it's got to be the same. No, there's a difference in capability. There's a difference in power based on the individual. So again, I think that it's just a tenderness of the Father to help us understand that which we're given is going to be according to something that he knows in us that we may not know. Now, what does that help us with? It helps us understand that because he knows this, and because this is the way he loves us, then it's going to be very difficult for me to say, well, I don't know if I'm capable of that or not. I don't know if I can do that or not. If he gives it, again, the capability is already recognized and is already there. All stories before God are not going to look equal. This is the other side of this. If this is true about this phrase, according to their several ability, then it also tells us to be very, very aware not to compare stories, not to compare what somebody is doing compared to what I'm doing. Because it's going to, first of all, be an unfair comparison. There'll be no basis for it, because again, God is recognizing the uniqueness in us all. So it should never prompt a comparison or a measurement against any other person. The outcome of both with 5 and 2 is exactly the same. Notice that. And this is one of those real significant indications that since both of them are the same, the words to one and the words to the second one are exactly the same. Well done, good, faithful servant. I will make thee a ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of our Lord. So it's both delivered exactly the same, received exactly the same response, because they went according to that which they had been given. The second apparent thing that's in this that we can just recognize quickly is that fruitfulness is tied to these two words, good and faithful. Fruitfulness in the Christian life is a chronic problem. I think this is why, listening to this teaching, this is why I've been so drawn to this, is because I don't want anybody to, again, measure themselves according to anybody else, but we have to ask ourselves at some point, is the production of my Christian life what it should be? If God has invested in me what he's invested, taught me what he's taught me, shown me what he's shown me, revealed what he's revealed, is my life's production what it should be? And again, there's some things I'm going to say in this one because Jesus used this parable in such a unique way. But yes, I agree. We don't know the impact of what we do every day. We don't know how far the fingers or the roots run out of something we said, something we did. We truly don't know the impact, but I do believe that for any workman, for any person, son, daughter, who's recognizes who the master is as the father, would be able to look at some measure of fruit in their hands, whether it's somebody taking care of a nursery and watching the kids grow, and you watch them move from being able to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, and you realize that you're teaching them, you're training them as mothers and dads, you're watching these premier roles that we've been given as fathers and mothers, which there is no role greater. Don't fail at that one. You may fail at your work, you may fail somewhere else, but don't fail in the most important job that God's given in the raising of children. Make sure that one is done well. But even in the raising of children, you know, we ought to be able to see this measure of a result. And so it's, again, I don't want to draw a huge focus on result, but I can't ignore it either. And wonder for my life, for others, you know, just to ask them to consider if my life and all that I know and all that I've been given, the blessings I have, the proportion given to me because of this several ability, if there's a production that can be seen. My mind goes back to the cursing of the fig tree, why Jesus would do it. Like, simply because it had no fruit? Yes, because it had no fruit. Because it had leaves which advertised that it was the season for fruit, but it got to the tree, and though there were leaves, there was no fruit. And the teaching of that is, but for church to have everything it needs, to church have a way to express a voice, has power, has everything that appears to be fruitful, but there is no fruit. It has the appearance, the tree had the appearance of fruitfulness, but had no fruit. Well, much of the religious world today has the appearance of fruitfulness, but no fruit. So there is a necessity to have a conversation about the result of the Christian life, because the consequences, the teaching here, the warning that comes through this is, don't ignore this. Don't ignore this question about what your life is producing. We just got through talking about the being absorbed in the vine and the production that's according to that abiding in John chapter 15. The Greek word for good and faithful, the Greek word for good includes these words. I just kind of copied these down out of the Strong's definition: useful, pleasant, agreeable, joyful, happy, excellent, distinguished, upright, honorable. That was all wrapped up in the word good. Now, I'm not going to do the same thing for faithful. We talked a lot about, from last week, about faith is the source of our blessing. Faith is trusting someone, something to do something for you that you have no possibility of doing yourself. And once again, it's a very simple picture, because you have faith in the chair or the stool or the bench or whatever you're sitting on this morning. You have faith in it. And that faith is letting you do something totally impossible, because if the chair disappeared, you wouldn't be able to hold the position that you're in without it. So it's such a simple illustration of what faith does, but it brings the blessing, and but it is also the source, being this good, useful, honorable, distinguished, and faithful. These two things mixed together is what's going to produce fruitfulness. So if the examination is, I don't know about the fruitfulness of my life, he's telling us this is where you go. Am I useful? Am I making myself available? And am I faithful? Do I believe what he says to be true? Do I believe that I'm loved? Do I believe that I'm powerful? Do I believe that I'm strong? Do I believe those deposits have already been made into my checking account so that I have access to strength, I have access to power, I have access to love, I have access to hope all the time? Think of this just a second. I will, you will, we will have the absolute blessing of a profound opportunity when I get to stand before the Lord and say, this is what you gave me, and this is the increase. This is the outcome of faithfulness. Please be so aware that we're going to have the blessed opportunity to stand before Jesus and say the words that are described in this story, the words that Jesus used in this parable, that I'm going, in this day of reckoning, the judgment seat, the bema, I'm going to have the profound opportunity to say, Father, or Jesus, this is what you gave me, and here is the increase. Here is the result of me trusting you. Here is the result of faith. Here is the result of me believing what you've told me. Here is the result of letting you do through me what only you could do. We are going to have, everyone on this call is going to have that profound moment when we get to say to God, to Jesus, here's what you gave me, and this is the increase. This is the outcome of faithfulness. Basically, we say this: what your faith in me, the faith you gave me as a gift, produced because I said yes to your will, yes to your truth, yes to your promises, yes to your prophecy, yes to your revelation, yes to your instruction. This is the outcome, because I said yes in faith, because I heard you and I obeyed. This is the outcome. And I hope, hearing that, you are stirred to excitement and not dread. That you are stirred to the anticipation of it instead of the, oh no, I'm not sure what that's going to be like for me. Because if it's an oh no, I don't know what it's going to be like. Well, the goodness of God says there's time. we still have life and breath in our lungs. And I can still tell others, I can still love, I can still show, I can still give, I can still be obedient. And he says, I will give you back all the years that others have devoured. I'll give all that back to you so that when you stand on that day, your proportion that you hand back to me will be full and complete. I hope you see it as a blessing, a blessed opportunity, and not a moment of question or a moment of dread. We have all heard at funeral services an illustration of a person's life is the dash between the date of birth and the date of death. That illustration. It's a good illustration and often used, especially at the cemetery, because all the markers have it. Date of birth, date of death, and the life is the dash in between. I'll tell you this morning that what happens between the 5 that was given to this person and the 5 he brought back, that dash between those 2 5s is you. It's me. 5 given, 5 plus the first ones, and the increase is now returned. What happens between those 2 numbers, that dash is your life. It's you. And the words of Jesus resonate. Well done. In that moment, well done. We don't like to quantify. This is kind of a big issue in the Christian church today. It's a big issue with me because it's fed so much by the conversation of performance. But when Jesus says well done, he's saying, even though we don't like to quantify what God is doing through our assignments, through the calls upon our lives, he doesn't seem to have a problem with doing it in this context. I mean, he's drawing a very specific reality that you ought to be able to see a tangible result and know what you're actually handing back to him on that day of reckoning. Again, I don't know where this leaves you, but I hope it leaves you with either, man, I'm so glad I'm finally on track. I'm so glad, though I might not have been over a long time, I know now that my life is producing what it needs to produce because I'm hearing him. I'm being obedient. I'm simply doing that which he gave me to do according to my own ability. He's giving that to me. But the focus this morning is largely on guy number 3. Verse 24. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid. And I went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there that thou hast, that is thine. He gives him back the 1 talent. Well, the basic but profound difference between the first 2 and the third is simply their view of their Lord and Master. Do you think about this? What they did, the first 2 did, and the last one did, is completely wrapped up in how they saw the one who gave them what they gave, what they were given. How they saw the one who gave 5, the one who gave 2, and the one who gave 1. It draws complete attention away from the fact that there's a difference between 5, 2, and 1, and it draws immediate attention to what the first 2 saw in the Lord. They didn't seem, the one who got 2 didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that somebody else got 5 if he knew it. But the reality of this is again, it's real simple, that we begin in this verse to recognize the profound difference. This is a robust statement to make, and I realize that, and it may sound way too simple, but your life as a believer will come solely out of that view How do you see your Lord? How do you see Jesus? How do you see your Father? What do you believe about them? What's in your mind? What's in your heart about the person who has given you the gifts? It all will come out of that. Even the vital view that you have of yourself. Because you've heard me teach a lot that life boils down to basically two things: how you see God as your Father, and how you think He sees you as His child. Both pieces of that hinge on how you see Him. And notice in this third servant's wrong view of his Lord affected the entirety of his life and led to his lack of fruitfulness. Do you hear it in his words? Lord, I knew thee that. You hear those words back in verse 24? Then he who had received the 1 talent came and says, Lord, I knew thee. He's about to express what he thought he knew about the Lord. And we realize that what he thought about the Lord affected his fruitfulness. So do you hear it in his words? Lord, I knew thee that. What did he know? Well, he knew that the Lord was a hard man. He knew that he reaped where he did not sow. He gathered where he did not straw. And that word, don't be thrown by, it just means the winnowing, the throwing the grain up in the air to blow the chaff away so that the seed would fall and that you could eat it. He knew that he should be afraid, and he knew that it was okay to waste the provision that the Lord had given him. This is what he says he knew. And do you think what he knew about the Lord affected his story? Do you think it affected this moment of reckoning? Well, it's absolute. This is why we have to keep coming back to the conversations. What do you know about God? What do you know about Him as your Father? Do you know that He loves you? Do you understand? Do you see? Do you hear? Do you actually feel His touch and to know who He is? Because if you don't, it will lead to an outcome like this. This servant says, I know. He knew. He didn't say, I wondered, I questioned. It might have been. I hope that we can hear by revelation this morning that the fruitfulness of our life is coming out of a direct relationship, directly correlated to how we see the Lord. It's profound. It is profound. Our personal fear of failure comes from the wrong idea that any of this depends on us. The fear that stops us in a moment of obedience is the fear that I might mess up. And God's saying, how do you mess up something that I'm not going to give you any opportunity to mess up? This is not on you. This is on me. You could stand up and say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and if the Holy Spirit wanted to deliver a message through the alphabet, He would do it. Even in our babbling, God will use what we babble so that it will come out and somebody will understand it, because they'll see the heart, they'll see the obedience, and lives will be changed. But we assign it to us, and it creates this personal fear of failure. Well, let me deliver a piece of news that I hope you already know. You are not going to fail as a son or a daughter of God. It is impossible. Because He didn't give you the means to succeed. He didn't give you the means to fail. The relationship is set. It's only in our response in fellowship to the relationship that we have is where this variable comes in. That is, again, relationship, totally unaffected by us. My mom and dad were always my mom and dad. I don't care how far I ran. I don't care what I said. They were always my mom and dad because the relationship was not up to me. They established it. All I had the opportunity to do was in fellowship respond to the relationship that they had established. We do have a great part to play in a system, and I hate the word system, but I couldn't think of a better one. We have a great part to play in a system that is designed by God to run on faith as our fuel and free will or choice to determine the result. I want to say that again. The system outcome, fruitfulness, the topic for the morning, fruitfulness, it's been designed by God in this plan to run, be based on faith. Faith is the fuel of it. To trust Him. Faith is the fuel of it. Free will or choice, our choice, determines the result. That's what He designed. I'm going to introduce something this morning that is I'm going to do my best to make it extremely simple. But Jan and I are listening to a book right now on Audible entitled All the Light I Could Not See. It is an extremely good book. The setting is World War II, and it's largely the story of a girl that is blind. All the light, I think maybe all the light we could not see, but in this they introduce a concept, and it's built around this word, and it's not. I had to look it up. Jan and I looked it up because it's just not one that we use, largely because it's a term in physics, and the term is entropy. ENTROPY, entropy. It is again not used. Not. I don't know if outside of this I'd ever even heard the word. Those of you who took physics in high school, you probably did. I'm going to read you the definition of entropy, which will not help you. Don't think I'm reading it to you so that you will gain great clarity. But I want to give you the technical term of entropy. It says a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. A lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder, and then the example they give is a marketplace where entropy reigns supreme. Okay, now you can make a little bit of sense out of that definition if you go slowly enough and just kind of process each word as you go. Misunderstanding the Lord and misrepresenting Him is a tremendous cause of entropy within the Christian life. Now, here's the illustration that I would give you. If you have stood at the Hoover Dam, you understand that the purpose of building that dam had several causes. One, to stop flooding and to control and make and just put under control that which was out of control. But the biggest reason for it was so that the water would turn a hydroelectric turbine, a power source. That the water moving through the dam would turn the turbine, generate electricity, hydroelectric power. That's a concept we understand. But the water as a river coming to that dam, some of the water is lost. Some of the water is lost to friction against the bank, against the bottom, against the rocks. Some of the water is lost or redirected for other use. And some of it is lost because it goes into small tributaries and other rivers and things that are just offshoots of the main river. Well, all of the offshoots, all of the friction, all of the water lost that will never go through the turbine to produce hydroelectric power is entropy. It's the amount of what could have been available but was lost for other reasons, disorder or chaos as is described in the definition. Everything that drains off to lessen that which had been intended. So when I heard this and I'm preparing this lesson, it's like, I know this is a hard illustration, but I want us to understand that what he gave us, the goods that he gave us, the talents, the resources, the power, the knowledge, the revelation, everything that he gave us is designed to be able to produce fruitfulness. He gave it to produce fruit. He gave it so that there would be a life outcome from our story. But what happens when I compare these goods that he gave us to the river as it's approaching this dam and this hydroelectric turbine? When I compare that, what I realize is that there is so much of what God gave us to produce a fruit that is the outcome according to his kingdom. We spin it off into many, many other things. It eddies into worry. It eddies into fear. It eddies into disbelief. It eddies into wasted time, wasted effort. It eddies into disobedience. And what we realize is that which he gave us to produce much is producing little, because even at times we build a dam in the river ahead of what was intended. Can you imagine what would happen if there was another dam put before the Hoover Dam to restrict the flow to the Hoover Dam, all the impact of that, with the number one dam that we build in the river that slows the production of God's fruit? And this may sound harsh, but it's religion. It's often church, because the church is trying to hold on to the resources that they were given to use according to their purposes, truly taking all the resources of what God gave and funneling them into their causes, into their purposes, and call it kingdom work when it's nothing but self-centeredness, self-absorption, because they're doing with it what they want to do, even if they do it in the name of God. Entropy is the quantity lost that's not made available for the purpose intended. I tell you what, we are consumed with that loss. It spins into worry, it spins into fear, it spins into anxiety. It spins into disinterest and this interest and this hobby and these kind of things. And I'm not against those things. I hope not, because if I'm in trouble, but even in the shop, when I'm working, I realize what's so often happening is that I am in a place with God. The saws may be running or something else may be running, and I realize I am in tune with the Father, because he speaks so often in those moments. Well, misunderstanding the Lord and misrepresenting him is a tremendous cause of entropy within the Christian life. The statements that the third man made about the Lord, could that be true? Let me just ask you, could that be true? Could it be true? Did the master reap where he didn't sow? Did he gather where he did not winnow, or where he did not straw? How do we know? I could bring that into court from this scripture and say, is that true? And the answer is, we know absolutely it's not true. We know it because all of what was expected was only tied to what he gave them. He didn't say, go use your stuff. He didn't say, go get somebody else's stuff. He says, I want you to, you take the 5 talents, you take the 2 talents, you take the 1 talent. He's saying, you only reap where, according to what I gave you, according to what you sowed that I gave you. So we recognize immediately that the claims were false. What he said about the Lord and the master of his life was absolutely untrue. All expectations, the accounting was based on what he had given them, and then their administration or their use of what they were given. If we don't know this about him, we will never discover who we are in him. If we don't know who he is, if we don't know his goodness, if we don't know his love, if we don't know his compassion, his mercy, if we don't know those things, we will never be fruitful. Because we will see a lack, we will see a brokenness, we will see a hurt, we will see bitterness, we will see something, because we don't understand that we are forgiven, that we are loved, that we are whole, that we are complete. We won't see ourselves because we don't know him. Our identity is settled by faith in Jesus Christ. Our identity is in Christ, the Anointed One. And the identity won't change, though our assignments may change hundreds of times over the course of a lifetime. You know, to go from pastor to whatever I am now, to Sunday school teacher and counselor, that is a new assignment for me. And I'm waiting on what the next assignments are, because I do believe with all my heart the new assignments are going to come. But he knows the timing, and so I've learned to float in the river as it takes me where it wants to take me. I've learned to float, strangely, because normally I'm just a swimmer, man. I'm going to be fighting it one way or the other, and God says, no, you got to float. You got to let me take you where I need to take you, so that you'll be where I need you when I need you. So I've just learned to float. Our identity is in Christ, but our responsibility, now being found in Christ, I can't separate the two, but our responsibility, now that we are found in Christ, is the administration or the use of what he deposited in us. Think of that. My identities, I'm a son, not going to change. Child of God, not going to change. Joint heir, not going to change. Forgiven, not going to change. Fearfully and wonderfully made, not going to change. In his favor, not going to change. That's all relationship, not going to change. My responsibility, now that I know those things and I'm found in him, is the administration or the management or the use of what he deposited in me. To let wisdom be wisdom and to let God be God. And here, at least, Jesus said, there's a measurable outcome. You'll be able to see the fruit, because someday you're going to hand it back to me. And you're not going to be surprised when I'm looking through the reckoning book and like, okay, man, there's all this fruit. Did you know that there was all this fruit? No, I didn't have any idea. Well, I know there's fruit. I know, and I have to be so careful here, because this is the thing that I fight against so much. But I am grateful that out of obedience of the body of Christ, out of the church in Sundown, I'm so grateful that there are some children in Gombe, Kenya, that drink from a well that your obedience paid for. I am so grateful that there are orphanages, places for children to sleep because of obedience and faithfulness. I can see that I know the story reaches in some aspect to Kenya. I shouldn't be shocked when in the day of reckoning and Jesus is looking at my story, that he's acknowledging that which I could see in some part in result. I could see in some portion. I shouldn't be surprised when that happens. He put in us, when we look at what are his goods, I have to start with the reality that he put in us his spirit, that we either release and liberate or we quench, because it's a real warning. Quench not the spirit. There's a recognition in the fact that we can quench it, then we can also release it. Now, though, by that spirit that now lives in me, that I want to set free, I can also recognize that with that spirit now in me, he has put in me his love, his grace, his mercy, his power, his hope, his strength, his kindness, his promise, his salvation, his restoration, his righteousness, his tenderness. This is ours to manage. This is ours to release or to quench, to restrict the spirit or to liberate the spirit. This is ours to quench. This is ours to manage. How much of it will reach the dam to turn the turbine to produce the power that will affect thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives, or how much will be spun off into self-interest, self-absorption, into religion, how much will be spin off into fear, into anxiety, into distraction, and how much of what he gave us and equipped us with will actually produce what he intended when he gave it to us in the first place. There's the question. Thank you all very much for the morning. I've run just a little bit late, but thank you all. And I would encourage you to just keep in mind, please, the Hill family. Keep in mind the Max and Deb McGlasson, the Castillos, Richard and Clelia, to wake yesterday morning to get the news in the middle of the night of that night before last that Vicky had passed away. It's still, it catches me in moments, and it's still so heartbreaking for this young mother to lose her life to this virus. So please keep that family in your prayers. Also, if you would, keep the family of David Hatley, David and Jennifer in Kenya. Keep that family in your prayers as well. David passed away this past week, had a couple of heart attacks one day, and he survived the heart attacks in the moment, but he died later in the night. So please keep David and or Jennifer's family in your prayers. There's a lot now that changes. There's a lot that shifts. I know there's a lot of plans that have already been made, but there's still probably a tremendous amount to do, and in the middle of great loss. So there's so many families that are experiencing this time of year. It's just so hard, and just got this note that Joe's brother passed away this week also. So just there's so much that can overwhelm in this day and time. And it is important. This is a extremely important time for us to be light and life, because darkness is so overwhelming. So just let what God gave us become answers and hope and tenderness, and just to bring joy that can't be found anywhere else, but truly can be found in him. So thank you all very much. Please keep those in your prayers. Bye-bye.